Hi, folks, and welcome to the houseatwork.com Home Repair Clinic podcast. My name is Jim Salmon.
And I'm Peter Schick.
And today we are going to talk about foundations, wet basements, and how to stay out of trouble with all of that riveting stuff.
Yep. And I think this is fairly pertinent, at least up here right now, because of the amount of rain we've had as of recent.
Yeah.
And it's something I've had to deal with. I've seen it with some of the places I've shown some of my clients as well. And it's something that gets brought up fairly often, especially if you even see just a little water in a basement. It just starts bringing up all sorts of issues.
I'm the host of the Home Repair Clinic radio program on WHAM 1180, and my radio partner lives right on the lake. And he's his name is John Carr, but I renamed him Noah.
Yeah, because a great flood
his house is a nightmare. I mean, Lake Ontario. He bought that house 20 years ago without a home inspection. You know how we feel about that.
I'm sure you gave him a lot of cheap shots because of that.
He was a bonehead, and he's still a bonehead. And I told him, I said, one day that lake will get you and your family. And it's been 20 years, and every once in a while, he'd bring it up, and he'd go, the lake hasn't got me yet.
Yeah, I'm sure you're bringing it up now.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're bringing it up now.
I went in his basement, and there was a dime-sized hole in the basement floor, and water was shooting up 12 inches like a fountain.
Really?
And the front foundation wall is about, I want to say, maybe 18 feet from Lake Ontario.
Now, one thing I want to mention for all of our listeners who aren't in the upstate area, right now, Lake Ontario is at record highs, meaning the water level is super high.
Yeah.
And the reason it got like this is because I don't know all the details, but pretty much there's an agreement between the United States and Canada that regulates the water level in Lake Ontario. And usually if it gets too high, they'll let some of the water out and it will go down the St. Lawrence Seaway and it won't get too high. But the problem is in that area, in the St. Lawrence Seaway, it's really high too. And a lot of people in Canada are getting flooded because of how high it is. So
it's a nightmare.
Yeah. So they can't really drain it, and there isn't much they can do about it. And a lot of people who live on the lake, their places are getting eroded away or they're getting flooded basements, and it's a nightmare right now. So just to give a little perspective on it. And as you're saying.
Now, that was notwithstanding. I mean, if you're on the lake, you have a whole bunch of different problems. But one of the things, what I do for a living is I'm a home inspector. You hire me you're buying a house, you hire me to go in there and spend 2 or 3 hours with you and go over the house, write up a report, tell you all about it. We meet there, we talk, and et cetera. One of the biggest problems that scare people with buying a house is the foundation and wet basements.
Yep.
Nobody wants a wet basement. Nobody wants a water nightmare. Now, parts of the country that might be listening to this, what are you talking about? We don't have basements here.
Exactly.
Well, that's a good thing. I mean, consider yourself fortunate. The other part of that is all your mechanicals are on the first floor, but that's okay. Now, foundation wall problems are caused by moisture penetration, freeze and thaw, hydraulic pressure from expansive soils like clay, that kind of thing, and maintaining a good slope away from your foundation, a good drainage pattern or a natural swale away from your house is what we want to see. I find negative grades all the time where when you build a house, you dig a hole bigger than you need, right?
Yeah.
And then you backfill that, and that backfill wants to settle. Right.
Yeah, it settles, and now the water, instead of flowing away from the house, it flows towards it when it comes out of the gutters.
Right. Now, once in a while, we'll get in the basement, and what we're looking for in a foundation part of our deal is cracks, mortar joint cracks, and differential shifting and stress cracks and all that stuff that causes foundation failure.
Now, one thing I want to ask you about that, with the cracks in the foundation or anything, I mean, I feel like a lot of the fixes for that are kind of temporary, where it's like, oh, let me just patch it up. I mean, but does that really address the underlying issue?
In a couple of situations. First of all, concrete blocks, which are extensively used in this part of the country, get step cracks. Yep. And step cracks are actually our most desirable type of crack because it's just minor settlement and whatever. But
it's a fairly easy fix.
Yeah, you grind the joints out, you restrike them, and that's fine. As long as it's not differentially shifted, one side of the crack is higher than the other,
Oh, okay, that's what you mean. Because I've heard that before, like differential. It's like, whoa, big words.
Yeah.
I'm not that smart, man.
Yeah. Those are big home inspector words.
Yeah.
The stress cracks down the middle of the block, something went on there too.
Yeah.
And again, differential shifting is bad. Even hairline is that we can get over with. But horizontal mortar joint cracks indicate a bowed wall. And if the wall is pushed on from the outside through frost heave, or that's usually in the joint number 1 or 2 down from the top, or if it's down in joint 5 or 6 at the bottom, it's expansive clay. When you put water to clay soil, it expands. And boom, Those are difficult. You can't just patch them because the wall's bowed. We need to figure out what to do.
Now, if you have that kind of soil, I can imagine that, okay, I fix that, and say I do fix it, like how are you going to change the makeup of the soil? It's going to just come back.
It's easily done. It's easily repaired, the soil part of it, but it's rarely done because it's all about the money.
Yeah.
When a builder is building a home in a particular area, in my opinion, it's his or her job to know what the soil conditions are. Now, if you dig down there and it's like, Play-Doh all the way down, it's all clay, then when you build a house, you dig a hole bigger than you need, and then you bring in some approved backfill rather than pushing the clay back in the hole. So you build your foundation wall, and now you've got 3 feet all the way around, and you fill that with a different type of fill.
Okay.
Something that wouldn't be expansive.
Okay.
Now, that adds a few $1,000s to the price of the house, but then that should be built into that because the builder should know that.
Yep.
We don't want to wait till the house has been there 2 years and all of a sudden now we have a bowed foundation wall. That's not acceptable.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know. It always boggles my mind. We trip. What's the saying? You trip over a penny you trip over a dollar to get to a penny, or something like that.
Penny wise, pound foolish, or step
like
over a dime to pick up a penny. There you go. That's the one. Yeah. I was just thinking all the other different things. Yeah.
Now, in this part of the country, we have a lot of sump pumps because we have a lot of water up here. We're not like out California where they've been in a drought for 100 years. We have a lot of water here, and how we manage that water is very important. There's usually a perimeter drain below the floor in the basement. That, maybe a foot or so out from the wall. It's buried in the floor. You can't see it. And it runs all the way around the perimeter of the basement and then terminates into a sump crock. So the idea is that if you take a hit of water, it goes down, gets in the gap between the floor and the wall, into that tile, where it's tiled over the sump pump and pumped out.
Yep.
Now, all things, not being equal, if you have a weeping willow tree that's 50 feet away, the weeping willow tree roots will find that system.
Yeah.
The next thing you know, there's giant hairs of this stuff
That's true for some of these drainage systems. I've seen that also with a few basements where they're connected to like the water drainage system for like the city, and it flows out to that.
Yeah.
And then there's a tree in the front yard.
Yeah.
And guess what? The roots got into the pipe, and now you gotta snake it and do everything else. If not, flat out replace it.
Many of those underground drainage systems, if they're more than 25 or 30 years old, they're very problematic. And especially if
I believe it.
If you're buying a house in a city that's was built in 1929 and your gutter drops go into a cast iron hub in the ground, it's a lot of times the water that you think is nice and neatly going to the street storm sewer winds up back on your foundation because of rock crush or movement, or terracotta destroyed itself.
I've seen that, and the solution is so easy a lot of the time. I mean, you could simply just disconnect that gutter going into that system. Yep. Just like fill it in and just have it drain out and have it drain away from the house. Because a lot of the time, if they do have that issue, like you said, it'll come right back into the foundation. Now your basement's getting wet. Now you're having all these other issues. And I found a lot of the time, just disconnect it. There you go. Easy.
There you go.
Easy day.
People complain all the time about, moisty, moldy smells in the house. And if your basement is moist and your heating system has lots of holes and angles and things in the cold air return, it's picking up all of that musty, moldy smell and putting it in the cold air return and distributing it out through the rest of the house. So that's one of the modern technologies, is to seal your duct system. Seal all the corners with tape, and they have paints and things like that they use as part of the Energy Star program. which seals it up and makes it easier.
As an agent, one of the things that concerns me the most when I get a home report back after a home inspection is if there's a little mold. That's like the killer. There's a psychological thing with so many buyers, sellers, whatever, and that just wants to make people kill the deal. Now, because there's the existence of mold, does that necessarily mean it's a bad mold, or how do you actually? I know that's why I'm asking you this. Is it necessary? Oh, because if it's a mold, does it mean? How do you know if it's a bad mold?
I get asked that question constantly because I'm not a mold scientist guy, but it crosses into my world.
Oh, you're not?
No. I play one on the home. What are we at? The houseatwork.com podcast. The problem with mold right now is that there was a 2020 thing, or 60 Minutes, or both, on a house in California. Was taken over by some toxic growing mold thing, and they had to burn the house down. And that's all the people, and there are 240,000 kinds of fungus, and it's like nuts. And there's maybe 10 or 12 that wind up in building materials, and aspergillus and stachybotrys and some other kinds of things I'm probably mispronouncing, but who knows what it is? People say, is that the stuff that's going to kill me? I don't know about that. If you are sensitized to mold, or you've been diagnosed with a respiratory issues or nervous issues and nobody can explain it, and the doctor will say, go have your house tested for mold. And okay, but most of us, there's the, oh my God, mold people. They're like you run into all the time and that don't want anything to do with that. And then there's the people, I lived with mold all my life, I don't care. And then there's most of us in the middle. We think, all right, no mold is good. We don't want to deal with that.
So we just take out the insulation or whatever that has that. Or
if I find mold in an attic on the bottom of the roof deck, it's all black or whatever, it was poorly insulated. It was poorly ventilated.
I'll tell you one story I saw with a home inspection. They had the bathroom had a fan in it, and instead of putting the fan to flow outside, they just had the fan go into the attic. So so all of the moist air from like the shower and everything is getting pumped into the attic. And so like in the corner where that like pipe or whatever that had the moist air from the shower getting pumped into the attic, it was just covered in mold. It was ridiculous.
It was a mess.
It was so bad. And I was thinking, if I was the buyer, it was so bad where I'm like, if I was the buyer, I would also be having second guesses too. You know, I don't totally blame you for that.
I'll be going through a house and we have the normal things we're talking about. There's always a list. We get to the attic and find a moldy attic and everything stops. Mold is the buzzword these days. And then, gee, I don't know about this. And then will it be professionally mitigated? And what caused it to begin with? We need a better ventilator, figure out what caused it. So, those types of things can be. If I find mold in the basement, it's usually at the bottom of the wall. And concrete blocks, again, we use a lot of concrete blocks in this part of the world. We do have some poured wall foundations too, but the hollow part of the blocks fill up with water, and there's your water line. You can see it. And it's all black from there down, so that's a tough one. Cleaning up mold is... sometimes you get a pretty good deal on a house if it's all moldy and you understand how to fix it. Pretty much with drywall, I've been in a lot of finished basements where they had a water issue, and drywall is one of these things that almost can't come back. The rule of thumb on that is if you get mold-infested drywall, it should be replaced. So
I agree with that.
That's a good thing.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, and a lot of the time they didn't use, say, in a basement or a bathroom, they don't use that mold-resistant drywall that they have to begin with.
Well, that stuff's only been around a few years, and that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, moisture-resistant drywall was always good, and now the green stuff, which is the mold-resistant drywall, is a wonderful product. So.
Yeah, and like you said, that's only been around for a little while, but I mean, if you're going to be remodeling a bathroom or if you're going to be doing a finished basement, that's the stuff to use as far as I'm concerned.
One other thing we ought to talk about in relationship to wet basements, and probably the thing that makes the most impact on a wet basement situation at the least cost, and that's gutters. People call me all the time. I'm on the phone. I'm talking to them. I got a wet basement, this one corner, and I'm always talking about gutters and grading. No, my gutters are fine. I get over there, and what is it? It's the gutters. It's split out downspouts. It's just a 50-foot run with only one 2x3 downspout in there. Where are you going with that? It has to be set up correctly. You have to be able to capture, over 75% of whatever volume of storm would put your gutter system over the top. Now, there's always something that will gully wash it and it won't work. But you should be able to capture at least 75% of the rains that come there to maintain a dry basement. And getting the roof water out 6 to 10 feet out all the way around or in an underground modern system to the street, the storm sewer to street is what we're looking at.
Yep. And that's like we mentioned earlier. It's just some of the simpler things, just making sure the downspouts are pointed in another direction. You have the extensions on them if you need them.
Yeah, at the end of the winter, all those extensions, people have been walking on them. The kids have been running the snowmobiles over them. They're all crushed. And, you have to use your head. That stuff's going to overflow, and it winds up in your basement.
Yeah. Or I've seen them, just filled with leaves. They are never cleaned out. Or,
perfect cleaning of a gutter system would be 4 times a year. Nobody, I get it.
I get it.
Nobody's going to do it.
No one's going to do that.
But the last time is right at Thanksgiving when all the trees, all the leaves are down. That's the most important one.
And that's funny you mentioned that, because in the fall when the leaves are coming down, I'm always thinking to myself, should I be raking now? I'm trying to think to myself, when is the most opportune? When can I wait the longest until I actually have to just bite the bullet and do it?
Peter, I didn't have you figured for the president of the Procrastinators International. Come on. But, I'm a big proponent of 6-inch gutters. Mm-hmm. Most houses in America have standard 5-inch K gutter, which is the regular white stuff you look at, or various colors, but white's predominant. They make a 6-inch version of that same profile, and the downspouts go from 2x3 to 3x4. It's a win.
Really?
It's a win. It chokes out more larger leaves and little helicopters and all that stuff.
Interesting.
Pine needles and things we fight here.
Yeah.
And 6-inch gutters can handle twice as much volume of water.
That makes a lot more sense. So then you're not going to get clogged up with the leaves and everything else, and it should be able to just flow out instead of getting clogged up. That makes a lot of sense. Huh.
Now, one of the things modern inventions over the past 10, 12 years has been the invention of Delta Wrap. Now, that's a proprietary brand. There's a bunch of other
Now,
ones
is that
too.
this? Oh, actually, I'll let you just explain what it is. I think I know what you're talking about.
It's a big, thick plastic roll that goes on the outside of the foundation wall.
Okay.
And you backfill up to it. It has little dimple-type raised things on there. Keeps it out.
Yep, I've seen that.
Very thick. It's almost bulldozer safe. Okay, and they wrap they attach it right to the house with Tapcon screws. They shoot it right into the foundation walls, and what it does is it provides a little bit of a swimming pool liner type of deal on the foundation wall.
See.
And I'll tell you, houses with Delta Wrap are much drier than houses aren't. So anybody listening to this is building a house, and your builder's not using Delta Wrap or something comparable in another brand, you want to check on that.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
That's pretty cool. All it takes is money.
Oh, yeah. That's all
lots
it
of it. One of the biggest mistakes people make is the sump pump's running. I don't like it running. It's driving me nuts, especially at night when I'm trying to sleep. Well, sometimes your sump pump is a hard pipe connected to the floor joist, so you can put a Fernco rubber adapter in there, maybe to slow some of that down. But it's doing what it's supposed to do.
That.
I mean,
I've had people where I've shown a client a place, and they get concerned that there isn't a sump pump in the basement.
Well, that's a win, though.
Yeah, that's what I try to explain to them,
That's a gravity
too.
drain to the street or down the hill or whatever,
That's what I try to explain a lot of the time, too, because it's like, okay, if it doesn't have a sump pump, that tells me maybe it really isn't that much water to begin with.
Yeah.
Maybe it isn't a problem. If I don't see water lines on the wall or anything like that, or I don't smell that dank smell in the basement, and there's no sump pump, hey, awesome. You probably don't need one.
There you go.
And I just think that's worth mentioning too, because I get that fairly regularly.
Well, what people do is they go down the basement and they raise the float up so that the sump pump doesn't go on as frequent. Well, remember those two pipes we were talking about on the side of the sump crock, we want those to be able to spill into that crock, rise to a certain level, and pump
And
it
then
out.
pump it out,
We don't
yep.
want the water level including those pipes. So don't do that. That's a good thing. So I don't know. Water flow is inevitable in this part of the country, especially. You can't stop water. The word waterproofing your basement walls is a misnomer. You can't do that. You can slow it down
Yeah.
and you can merchandise it a little bit, make it look better, but you're not waterproofing your basement.
Yeah, I agree
That's
with
done
that
outside.
too. I totally agree with you on that as well. Some people say, "Oh, it just needs to. You just got to put a little plaster in there, just paint over it." I mean, look, you're putting a Band-Aid on the problem,
Right.
at best.
The how do I say this politically correct? There are wet basement contractors out there, and the wet basement contractor world has its, as does other things, has its swarmy element. And normally,
As with many other
Right.
industries.
when it comes to fixing a moisture problem in your basement, say you want to remodel it and make it into a room where you're storing books, and it's wet now, and you need to deal with it. There are systems that can be installed in your basement that are wonderful that can do that. But there's a lot of high pressure, some national change and things of companies that, these guys are not hydrologists. They're not water guys. They're not masons. They're professional salespeople. They've sold vinyl siding. You ever watch the movie? What's that? One of my favorite movies. I can't think of the name of it.
No, it's going to come to you like 2 hours from now. Like,
Danny DeVito and Richard Dreyfuss. Tin Men.
10 men.
Yeah,
That's where the siding and everything.
Some of the wet basement guys are tin men, and they'll tell you they're tin men, and it's all about sell. It's all about sell at all cost. And the modus operandi on that is they'll come and the quotes are always $15,000 to $20,000.
Oh, geez.
15 to 20. Okay. Then and when they're on the phone with you, this is the first flag. I want both of you will be there, right? Well, what do you mean? Well, your husband and your wife, right? Well, what business of yours is that? No, we need both of you there. Well, that's so that you can't say, wait a minute, I got to run this by my husband, or I want to run this by my wife. It's a hard sell. So you have to just be careful of that, because there are good wet basement guys out there that do a wonderful job at a fraction of the price. They get paid fairly, but they know what they're doing, and they're on the job, running the job. You don't want a suit and tie guy selling you something and making a huge commission on your basement. So that's all I'm saying.
No, totally. Totally agree with you on that.
Yeah,
totally agree, especially at that kind of price point.
Those systems, people tell me all the time, I have a stream in my basement. Well, no, you don't. You don't have a spring in your basement. I've only seen a couple of those where there's actually water flowing out of 15,000 houses that I've been in. So it's you don't have a spring in your basement. Most likely anyway.
That's one thing I'll hear too is people exaggerating.
Yeah. Yes.
There's this one client I had where they I think they had come through an open house or something, and they were mentioning like all the sump pump and everything, pumping everything out. And they're like, oh, it's just going constantly. I'm like, okay. So when I actually went there with them, like doing the home inspection, it was like every half an hour the thing kicked on. It's like, really, you're telling me you're complaining to me about this? People always.
I was inspecting a house years ago. This has got to be 15 years ago. It was a brand new house, hadn't been lived in yet. It was built in Chilai, which is
now this is
low area.
Chilai. Now it's spelled chili, but it's pronounced Chilai. That's one of the things with Rochester for everybody who's not in the Rochester area. Go on.
And if you look at I'm in Chile.
Yeah, that's how I thought when I first came here. Oh, chili. No. I got corrected very quickly. Chilai. All right, dude, whatever you want. I'll call it whatever you want.
There are some pretty low spots in Chilai. And brand new house, full basement. And I'm there doing a home inspection with my client who's buying the house. It's a couple weeks from closing. And the sump crock had 2 feeds to it, 2 perimeter drains.
Yep.
And water was coming out of both of those 4-inch hand core perforated pipes like a fire hose. Constantly.
Oh, wow.
Constantly. And they had a 1 horsepower, $500 Liberty pump in there, pumping that
And
out.
it was just doing
and
its
it was
thing.
running constantly.
Now, that was what I had in my mind with that one client, where it's like it's going constantly was what you're describing
exactly.
right there. It was nothing like that.
So my comment to my client was, I said, "What do you do for a living?" He goes, "I'm a salesperson," and I do. Well, that's another story. But so you're out of town a lot? Yeah, I'm out of town a lot. How are you going to go away? What happens? What do you think will happen to this basement if the power goes out?
Ooh, yeah.
He wound up not buying the house, not closing on the house. He had a lot of emotion in it, and they got into it.
Well, that makes sense. I don't blame him at all, especially when it's running like that. Yeah, I don't blame you at all.
I was torn about that because there was something going on there, and it was they had geologists going over this whole thing and water people, and the town was there trying to figure out if we could cut a ditch and drain it off or whatever. But it was the whole area
That is bizarre.
It was sitting in a swamp, and that was a big mistake. That's
a place that should have not had a basement to begin with.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
The lawsuit that went on after that involved the town. It involved the builder, the architect. I mean, everybody.
Yep.
What you do on something like that is you sue everybody, and then you see what happens.
They just do the shotgun approach to it. Yeah.
So anyway, you're listening to the houseatwork.com home repair clinic podcast. We do have an invitation for you if you'd like to send us an email with something that you'd like us to discuss. Peter's going to give you the email address because I completely forgot what it is.
Yeah, it's contact us at houseatwork.com.
Oh, okay. All right. So if you'd like to write in with a question that we could horse around with, we'd be glad to do that. And we thank you for listening to this houseatwork.com home repair clinic podcast. We hope to see you down the road at the next one. Peter, you have a great day. We'll see you soon,
Jim.
All right.